morning. Happy Sunday. Thank you for being here. Also, happy holidays. I just would like to begin by inviting everyone to join me in an acknowledgement. We acknowledge that we are gathered together today on the unceded land of the Shinnecock, Manhasset, and Montauk nations, who are still very much here, who are an active part of our community, and for whom we are very grateful to be in community with. So may the continued respect of this ancestral land continue and be the way that leads us forward. I have the honor of introducing our Insight Sunday speaker, which I get the general feeling that everybody in this room knows this person. Yeah. In addition to being an esteemed educator who has taught at Pearson School, as well as being a guest critic at NYU photography class, Peter is also the very beloved member of this community. Every time he comes into the church, he brings with him an energy that uplifts, that inspires, and sure as anything will make you laugh. And we are very, very appreciative of that. That's not pressure. There is no pressure. We love having Peter around. We are very, very grateful that you are speaking here today. He is also was the former coordinator of the British Trust, which brings us here at the church programs like Sag Harbor in Focus, which uplifts the students in the community with photography. And for that, we are also very grateful. So, without further ado, please help me welcome Mr. Peter Solow.
First, I would like to thank everybody for coming out today. And it's sort of cool because in the audience there are a bunch of former students of mine from Pearson who have shout them out, who, you know, I also graduated from Pearson several years ago, so none of us are there still. And for those students, I would just say this is either going to bring back fond memories or really bad memories of what it was like being in one of my classes. I also want to thank the church for several different things. One was for allowing me to participate in the residency program, which was a wonderful experience. And then the icing on the cake really was to be included in this exhibition. Totally unexpected. Now, depending on how I do, everything may be going downhill in terms of the church today, but I hope it doesn't. So, what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to put the work upstairs and some other things I've been doing recently in the context of a few central ideas that I have about art that I've sort of carried with me for a very long time. Many years ago, while I was a student at Cooper Union, my friend and teacher, artist Nick Marsicano, told me that he believed that irrespective of the content, every artist really only paints one picture. And the picture is a self-portrait, a kind of extraordinary artifact that's evidence of the artist's perspective, what they're passionate about, their predilections, you know, their abilities, but also a constellation of beliefs, the things that they carry, the ideas that they carry with them. And very importantly, it also reflects the questions that an artist may be asking themselves and the solutions and answers they may find. The other thing that Nick said was that every individual painting is sort of like a snapshot. You know, it's simply a snapshot. Like a snapshot, it only represents a moment in time. It reflects and is inextricably linked to what came before, and it also anticipates the possibilities of what can happen in the future. And my work upstairs in this exhibition is actually one of such moments. What unifies all my work is the centrality of the drawing and my ideas about the art-making process. And I'm going to devote a lot of time a little later on talking about this. But when I talk about drawing, I'm not speaking simply about making art or illustration. but instead the act and process of drawing as a transformative experience, a kind of magical experience. And again, I'll explain this later, but it also can be a kind of personal note-taking, and as a tool to focus the artist's attention. I've always thought that I could look at things without seeing them. And one tool that enables me to see what I'm looking at is drawing. The other thing that a drawing can do is it actually can help you figure things out and problem solve. You see this a lot in architectural drawings, and you see it, I use it this way all the time. And it's the essential core part of my method about making art. Now, I should turn something on. All right, this is the piece upstairs. My work in the exhibition was actually begun at the church residency in January of 2024. That was a while ago. The goal of the residency was to create a site-specific artwork, placing the audience in the middle of an imaginary piazza or city square by creating 4 5-foot by 14-foot composite panels made of photographs, drawings, and paintings. Using both digital technology and traditional mediums. So to get to this is the residency. If you don't recognize it, downstairs. This is the most elegant, sophisticated space in the entire church, incidentally. And this sort of gives you an idea, though it wasn't meant to do this. So I was working on 3 panels at the same time with this notion of creating a kind of piazza. And let me explain the use of technology. We're talking about large format printers, we're talking about digital cameras, we're talking about digital scanners, we're talking about computers, we're talking about Photoshop. And the whole purpose of that in my work is to create what would be the equivalent of an underpainting in one of my oil paintings, to create a foundation that I can then work back into, in not only using traditional mediums, but actually handmade, collaging, painting, drawing, doing all that kind of stuff on it. And I don't want to get, this is the piece upstairs, the way I brought it to the church. And it's not finished. It's purposely left in a kind of unfinished state because the real fun becomes, and the important part becomes when you work back into it and you draw back into it and you actually add something to the photographs and you collage on it. And I don't want to go into a large explanation of how this gets this way because it can be painful to listen to. And it's reminiscent for me of how I tried to sync my phone to my car, reading the manual, and can I just say, shoot me. I mean, that's how bad it is. But the process is basically that you start by, and I draw, I take photographs all the time as reference, but I draw all the time. And so the process is basically scanning the drawings, and sometimes photos, if I want to use an old photo I've taken that's in a slide form, and digitizing everything, and parts of paintings that I've done. There's pieces of, huge paintings that I've done that are unfinished, where I'll photograph part of it and I'll throw that into the thing too. And the idea is to layer the photographs and drawings on top of each other by manipulating the opacity. So both on the left side and the right side of this, what you're actually looking at are multiple photographs and multiple drawings on top of each other. And I get this showing up. This is usually the size of the drawing that things start out as. And one of the miracles of technology is that you can make things bigger, and sometimes when you have things that are really big, you can make them small. And it gives a kind of flexibility in doing that kind of thing. And all of it is just by a surface to work on. And I mentioned before, this is an underpainting of sort of mixed media piece that's on magic paper, which I'll explain later. And this is the later version of the same thing. And what happens over a period of time, the way it works is you just build up and build up things. This is an underpainting of a 60 by 80 inch oil painting that I'm still working on. This actually has about maybe 4 or 5 or 6 layers of both areas of paint and drawing on it. And this is a later version. So you see that this, again, with using the digital technology, for instance, in the piece upstairs, the whole idea is to sort of mimic that. And this is what, in terms of color, this is what a final painting may end up looking like. Now, what happened is that, and it's to be expected, when I left the residency, none of the panels were finished. And so I rolled them up and took them home and I stored them in my painting racks. But before I left, what I did is I photographed all of them the way that I left them at the end of the residency, with the idea of, and then I printed out smaller versions of them, a smaller version, 24 by 68 inches, smaller version, so I could work on it in the studio. And I printed out a variety of other things with this idea of working on them, because using the digital technology, and using, not the technology, but using paintings and drawings and photographs in the same piece, there are certain challenges to it. One of the challenges is to make it into something that's cohesive and that works as one piece, that has the kind of integrity and truthfulness that occasionally in my more traditional work I get to. And the second thing is just to play around with the idea of how many different ways can I use the technology, not in the finished product, but just in the process of making the work. And I've been working with this stuff since I was invited to come to the almost beachfront studio at Stony Brook College and work with Scott Sandell. So this has been something that I've been working on this concept has been something I've been working on for, I can't add, but I would think, 15, 20 years maybe, around that amount of time. And it's something I don't process things very quickly, so a lot of times it takes me a long time to figure out, oh, I could do this, or, this would be a good idea. So, as I said, at the end of the residency, nothing was finished. And the work was finally finished in August of this year. And this is my fabulous studio. And what I had to do was, based on these incredibly sophisticated panels that they have downstairs in the church, I decided what I was going to do was build portable walls in my studio. Now, there is a difference between the portable walls here and the portable walls in my studio. The ones downstairs are elegant, and they are sophisticated, and they roll back and forth, and they are pristine. If you look at the top of this, it looks like I chewed through it to cut the homoso, and it's nailed together with things on the top, because everything is falling over backwards and forward. And fortunately, this is the finished piece. But fortunately, my studio is just large enough to fit the piece in and finish. And finishing it meant adding collage elements, which are those strips of pozo paper, like those white things you see, and also the drawing. And I actually added to the photography that's in this piece too. Now, to put this in context, and to put the piece in context upstairs, just some other things that were going on at the same time. As I said, the residency was January 2024. In February of 2024, Scott Sandell and I traveled to Florence with about 13 or 14, you lose count of how many kids are with you. Hopefully you bring them all back. But we brought 13 or 14 Pearson High School students to Florence, Italy, and presented an art making workshop using the Academy of Art in Florence. And it's something that I've wanted to do for a long time. I've traveled with both students and adults to a variety of places, probably in the last 30 years, 20 or more trips, but I've never had the opportunity of actually doing an art making trip. And Scott, who is a very close friend, and I have, he's presented a number of different workshops at Pearson and in a variety of, and actually also at the church, in a variety of subjects. And this was an opportunity for us to do one last, workshop together. As I said, I retired, and we both said to ourselves, this is the last hurrah, it's gonna be great, this is gonna be a wonderful thing. And it ended up being really a pretty cool experience. Now, when we returned from Florence, while we were at Pierre's for one of our regular Monday or Tuesday meetings at the bar, when nobody else is there, we had sort of like an epiphany, more like an idea. And the idea was, we have always wanted to exhibit our work together. Not always, but recently we've been wanting to exhibit our work together, in spite of the fact that Scott's work is really beautiful, wonderful, abstract work, and mine is figurative. That sometimes is beautiful and wonderful, but the idea of us exhibiting together. So we thought we could exhibit together, and the central idea was going to be our experience in Florence. And the exhibition would be self-funded and take place in what we all know is the capital of the East End art scene, and Springs, Ashrock Hall. And that we were going to do it during the height of the fall foliage season because it would be more cheerful. And the other thing is that because all the work we were going to do in the exhibition was going to be brand new work, we had to give ourselves some time to do that. So consequently, at the same time I was working on the piece upstairs, the composite upstairs, I was working on a variety of other work in a variety of different mediums. Everything from oil painting to drawing, mixed media, acrylic and graphite, ink, monoprints, many of which I did with Sam and Sue here, and my monoprints they're a work in progress, and using collage. And the reason I bring this up was that even though the challenges of doing these composites using these different elements in them is slightly different than any of these other mediums that I work in, they're unified by some ideas I have, both about the process and just these ideas that are central to my work. And what I found is that the other work I was doing exactly at the same time was reinforcing what I was doing on the piece here and the other composite. And so these are some, when I say composites, again, with photography and painting and drawing. And so this is some of the work that I was doing at the same time. And this is other work that I was doing at the same time. And these are oil paintings that I was working on at the same time. I was trying to create in my studio the equivalent of the stateroom scene at Night at the Opera, where they have on the boat that little room and everybody sort of like it. So if you can imagine the personification of a ping pong ball, that's what I was doing in my studio, running from one kind of thing to another kind of thing, back and forth. But as I said, and these are collages so I'm doing all of this work at the same time, but all of it is reinforcing each other because of, again, a process of working in and saying to myself, okay, this is what I value, this is what I believe in. What would be the variation of the theme in a collage? What would it look like if it was going to be a mixed media thing? And what was it going to look like if it was a monoprint? And this is one of the pieces that I was working on at the same time. This is a bigger picture of one of the collages, and I started thinking about string. And incidentally, if you spend a lot of money on oil paint, the solution is go to the hardware store and get some string, because it costs money. And so if you look at the string on the bottom, and that's Kozo paper that's glued on to the picture, I was trying to draw with that. And this is actually a picture of two of the kids that went with us to Florence. Well, one night we took them out and they were making rubbings of the walls and the ground after dark. And over on the left-hand side, these are sections of some of the rubbings that they did. And once again, thinking about the idea of, and composite photographs, and thinking about the idea of using string. And there's different varieties of string. It occurred to me after doing this for a while, well, I could get thinner string and thicker string, which would be like thinner lines with a pencil and thicker lines. And I just like the way that the Kozo, the strips of the Kozo paper, which is translucent, feels, and you can actually sort of see through it. And then, you know, the reason I brought this up, because it's going to come up later in what I'm going to say. This is the road to Itali, which is in Settignano, and it's where Bernard Berenson had his villa, which is now Harvard's Renaissance Study Center. And I had done a lot of drawings of this particular place and taken photographs, and it meant a tremendous amount to me. This place somehow was just like this particular part of this road, the part because it's empty and whatever, meant a lot to me. And I had worked on this for a couple of months and hung it, and this is the way I work. As I said before, it takes me a long time to process things. I hung it up on the wall, I kept looking at it, and it really didn't work. I was having all kinds, in an earlier version, not this one, in an earlier version, it really didn't work. And it was metaphorically, artistically constipated. And what I mean by that was that I was so tied to the specificity of the drawings that I had done and my memory of the place that a lot of my ideas about what really meant a lot in terms of not only process, but the ideas I had, I wasn't thinking about. And, Matisse wrote this great essay called Exactitude is Not True. And so shortly before I had the thing framed, where I said, I can't stand looking at it anymore, and I literally painted out 2/3 of it. Not like in no paint, but with a kind of translucent paint. And then I completely redrew the thing. And I said to myself, if I want this to work, forget about all that other stuff I was looking at, forget about all the resources I was using. I just had to look at this. And I had to make this work in and of itself. And if it didn't look, if it wasn't like photorealistic, or it wasn't exactly like the place it was, I didn't think if somebody purchased this that they were going to go to this street and they were going to like look up the road and look at the whole thing and say, oh man, he didn't get it. What they were going to be left with was this. And so it had to work. Okay, so let me just get to this. The next thing that happens is, as another way of adding another layer of variations on the theme, Scott and I, in a way of making our work again, some of it's figurative, Scott's work is abstract. We had commissioned paper, and one of the things that would unify the exhibition was going to be that we would use some of the same materials. And when the paper came back, I didn't know what it was going to be like, but I'll just show you. I just brought this again, showing how. This is what the paper looked like. And when I opened it, I was modestly surprised, because I didn't have any idea what it was going to look like. I don't usually work on, you really can't see it. And this is actually in a state that's been treated, so it doesn't look quite as pronounced as it did before. But I don't usually work on a gray tone, like a brown paper. And also, one of the characteristics of the paper was that it was absorbent like a sponge. And that using it, I discovered untreated, and even using gesso to treat it a little, and a variety of other ways of treating it, was that if I tried to draw, the way I would normally draw with a pencil, it wouldn't work. It would tear the paper, it would indent the paper, I only could use the softest paper, and the kind of marks that it made on the paper was something that was totally unexpected. If I painted on the paper, I would turn around over the palette, turn around again, and all of the paint would disappear. It was just all gone. And I said, I said to myself, wow, this is, crazy and a challenge. And then there are these little white things floating around in it, which was a really actually terrific idea. These are torn up drawings of mine. We thought that we wanted to make, Scott and I thought we wanted to make it something very personal, so that we threw, when they were making, they had the pulp and everything, we threw some of our own stuff into it. They made the pulp, actually, this happened in a silo in the Midwest someplace where they make paper, like that. And we added that stuff to it. And so the challenge of this, and what was so cool and good about this, was it made me think about, take all the stuff that I experienced over all the years that I had made art, and come up with a solution with the paper to make it work. And I didn't come up with one solution. Over the time, again, that I was working on the piece upstairs and other work, I was just experimenting with this all the time. And so this is one of the solutions. And this was, I think, at a gesso base. This was another solution where I was using ink and pencil. And with the ink would absorb it. And this is, and we finally came up, Scott finally came up with this really solution to using this, which was very effective, which was to run it through a printing press, and then put something that was, I can't explain what it is, but it's a kind of shellac or treatment that makes it less porous, and that actually flattens the paper out. I mean, without flattening out, it's like an egg carton. And this was another, this is a monoprint, and then this is a mixed media piece with ink and drawing and everything in it. And the point, and this is, again, I think a piece I showed you before, this was another thing. And the point about it was that it was extraordinarily experimental. It was, and to do something with it, I had to sort of like use not the resources of, oh, this is what pencil's gonna look like, or paint's gonna look like. It was more like, okay, these are the steps I need to take to try to get, and to try to find something that was worthwhile. And also to understand that I was gonna put stuff on this paper and it wasn't gonna work. And I would look at it and go, oh, that wasn't a good idea. And that I would have to have the resources and the flexibility to then change things around. All right, now it's time to talk about Mondrian. Another thing that, when I went to school, I had some wonderful teachers, and all of them talked in their own special language, and they said things that I often didn't understand. And this was Nick Marsicano again, who said, if you want to understand how to draw the figure, you have to look at Mondrian. And I looked at, but the guy's hands aren't part of this. This isn't a performance piece. He was just saying anything else. But he wasn't talking about this Mondrian. He was talking about this Mondrian. And there was a great show at Janus years ago, I think it was in the early 70s, of unfinished Mondrian. And when I looked at this, I realized that Mondrian was struggling is the wrong word to find, but the whole process he used was trying to find the exact placement of a line. The space between that line and the next line over, and the white spaces, and the proportion of those, where the colors were going to be, and how much color he should use. And that it wasn't a kind of formulaic thing, using a word that Matisse likes again. It was extraordinarily intuitive. That his process of working had to do with him looking and finding and trying to find this thing that seemed to work. And with this idea that if, conceptually, if he moved one line in the piece, it was going to change everything. And that everything was essential. And, again, the idea is, I got a correct quote here. Matisse, there's a great book edited by Jack Clement called Matisse on Art. And if you ever get in, those of us who are artists in the room, ever get in trouble, read Matisse. And either you can reject what he says or you can love what he says. A lot of what he says I've embraced. And Matisse said that expression does not reside in passion bursting from a human face or manifest in a violent movement. The entire arrangement of my picture is expressive. The place occupied by the figures, the empty spaces around them, proportion, all has its share. And everything that is not useful in the picture, it follows as harmful. And so one of the ideas, central ideas that I embraced, was this idea of the rectangle. That what was of prominent importance was all of the marks and everything that you do inside of that rectangle. And that you had to fall in love with the entire rectangle and everything that was in that, or you weren't going to be successful. And also, just another thing is, if you look at this, if you think about this thing, and you think about Matisse, either works where he does, he'll have a model and he'll do 50 drawings of the same model, or like with the pink nude, he'll take one painting and he'll have 50 different versions of the pink nude on this one canvas. It isn't about, it's about seeing what all the possibilities are. It's not about knowing, it's about seeing the possibilities and having the willingness and the courage to change things. To having the confidence and the courage to change things. So if you put these two things together, intuition and courage, I think that they're very, very important. Now, having said that, it's easier to say, oh, you should have courage than the other thing. When my teachers used to say to me, take notes, and I wouldn't understand what they were talking about, taking notes. Saying to somebody, you should have courage is like, oh, great, thanks. That's a big help. But keep that idea about courage in mind. So just two examples quickly. This is a detail of a Da Vinci, and one of the things I just want to show you quickly about this was that you can see there's actually 3 hands in this drawing. And what he's trying to do, this is like a study, and what he's trying to do is he's trying to find that thing that intuitively to him feels right. Now, of course, it's based on years of observation, all of these other things that he's done. But he puts, what's so cool about Da Vinci is he puts a mark down, and instead of erasing it, he just leaves it there. And so you have these multiple arms, and you have these multiple, and if you've seen the other paintings that Da Vinci does, they're quite incredible. And then there's Sheila. Now, Sheila, is very expressive, and the way he draws the figure is very expressive. I love this particular Sheila because in this drawing, I have a feeling, well, first of all, if you look at the space around the figure, each of them is a different size, and each of them is a different shape. And I think that contributes to the meaning of the figure itself, and the drawing that he does inside the figure. And I'm just going to leave it here for a second because I think this is really cool. I mean, conceptually, the idea is another thing that Marsicano said to me was, he said, when you're drawing a figure, if you're drawing an arm, understand that you're also drawing the space at the same time. And this idea of looking or being sensitive, again, to the rectangle, and I think it's in Sheila's most effective work, he is very, very sensitive to the placement of the figure, to how he draws a line, understanding that he's also describing the stuff outside of it. Okay. Cézanne's wife. From the time I was a munchkin, I was never a munchkin, I was a younger person, much younger than I am. I would go to the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and every time I would go to the Metropolitan Museum of Art, I would go and look. And it's not one of my favorite Cézanne paintings, but I was mystified by this painting, and I would go up there, and for years and years and years, I would ask myself the same question. And it's a question that I couldn't find an answer. I couldn't figure it out. And the question is going to sound very, very silly, but for me, it's a very meaningful question. The question was, why did he paint it this way? Why did he paint it this way? I mean, if I brought her in here today, and I placed her in front of me, well, first of all, she would be in really bad shape, but if she wasn't, assume she was still kicking, she wouldn't look like it. And if you photographed her, she wouldn't look like it. And if you look at this, and I'll be more specific, her face is asymmetrical and somewhat distorted. Her arms are different lengths. You got that crazy diagonal reddish thing behind her. She's tilted. Stuff on the left side is straight up and down mostly. On the right side, it's going at diagonals. And the conclusion I came to after many years was, And if you disagree with this conclusion, I'll understand. And it's okay. But this is a conclusion that I've embraced. And the conclusion is that the reason he painted her this way is this is the way he saw her. And what that means is that through the process of drawing and painting over a period of time, it transformed him. It made him see the world differently, and he made what he saw in the world very, very specific. And by doing those two things, what I think happened with him is that it's not about style, it's about language. He created a language of seeing that was particular to him. And it isn't about style, it's about language. And, you know, again, from my perspective, art making literally changes what you, it can change what you see and how you see it. So I thought to myself, I mean, I wanted to do both things. And I thought to myself, how am I going to do that? You know, I wanted to embrace these ideas, and as I said before, you know, about having courage. How are you going to do it? And I thought that the solution was to draw. And to draw, and to draw, and to draw everything I could find. And this is an archival ancient drawing from the 1970s at Little West 12th Street, Meatpack House. And this is my cat Rasputin. And just practice over and over again these ideas that I saw in Sheila and Matisse and Cezanne and Mondrian, and try to apply them. And oh, this is the, I'm still looking, Eric, I'm still looking for this picture. I don't know where. I mean, the real one. And what I started to do is I started to say to myself, it's not just good enough to draw. What I need to do is I have to change up the way I do. And so what I started to do is, you know, most of the time I would be drawing, when I started drawing, I'd start sort of in the top middle of the page and work down, and I draw object to object to object. And what I started to do was practice drawing from the bottom of the page to the top of the page, or from the outside of the page to the inside of the page, and draw really fast. And sometimes draw with my left hand, though I'm right-handed, because I understood that if I can move my left hand, I have no facility with it, and I can't even control where the pencil goes. So if the thing I was drawing was going to work, it was going to work not because of how beautifully I drew the lines, but how I organized the lines in the page. And I tried to figure out all kinds of different ways of concentrating on that idea of the page. And I started to draw in a very non-sequential way, where I would start drawing part of the page, or an object on the page, and I would force myself to go to another part of the page and start working from there, so that the whole drawing would develop like a Polaroid picture, where it all comes up at once. And it transformed the way that I drew, and it was at first very, very difficult for me to do this, because it was totally antithetical to everything how I had drawn before. But again, my hope, this is a sketchbook drawing, my hope was that by drawing it with this method, that I could deal with that issue of the rectangle, but also at the same time somehow transform myself. And it's an ongoing thing. Though I have to say, you know, to my credit, whenever I started drawing now, I don't even have to think about it. This is the way I draw. You know, I don't, and it's become so secondary to me. Now, whether it's successful or not, that's another story, but at least, you know, it's something different. And, you know, there's little sketchbook drawing things. Okay, so, two things. Dory Ashton, one of my other teachers, said that every artist should have a culture of art. You know, as I said before, the teachers I had didn't speak quite in English or use words the way everybody else did. What she was talking about an inventory of images, or memory of images and things that you saw, that a reservoir that you could, without even thinking about it, refer to. And the other thing is, you know, at one point, Augustine had said, you know, in a conversation, you know, kindred spirits, finding people who have made art that were kindred spirits. And when I first saw this, I was blown away. This is, for me, it's absolutely magical. It's luminous. It is, and again, it's beautiful. And so, for me, when I think about this guy, you know, the business of cutting off part of his ear and committing suicide and maybe being schizophrenic or having epilepsy, as an artist, it's totally irrelevant. This is what matters. You know, and that other stuff people can talk about, and there can be documentaries about, and art historians can talk about. But as an artist, this is what matters. And again, this is all about language. And what I would suggest to everybody here is that if we look at the marks themselves, there are marks that, there are some that are elegant, beautiful, but there are marks that are very simple, and that almost everybody in the audience, including me, could make marks like this. What makes this into something special is how he puts them together. And the density of marks, the diversity of the language he uses, and again, how they fit the rectangle. And, you know, my other thought was if you, all right, I'm gonna tell you, if you like Van Gogh, you gotta like Rembrandt. You just gotta come from virtually the same place almost. And Rembrandt is another person that I felt an affinity for. And you know, Rembrandt's different. I mean, he's a different kind of artist. He has a magic line. You know, when he draws, it's like he just does it and you go, wow. You know, that's like the most incredible thing. So getting back to what I had said before, if you love Van Gogh and you love Rembrandt, how do you figure out what they're doing? The way you figure out what they're doing is you don't necessarily copy them, but you try to embrace their language, try to figure out how the language works. So over a period of years, this is actually Noyak. This is the first drawing I ever did when I went to this at Harvard. Nobody sees it and sees what, I mean, I understand it, but it may be a thing that nobody else understands. And again, you embrace the idea, and the only way that I really can see things and understand things is by drawing like that. And the idea is not to become Van Gogh or to become Rembrandt, but it's to somehow absorb that stuff and mix it. If you thought about yourself as being sort of like baking a cake or whatever, it's the recipe that you add. It's the stuff that you add to who you already are and what you already do. And I happened to go in August, while I was finished, right before I was finishing the piece upstairs, to London, and to visit my daughter who now lives in Twickenham. It took me a long time to figure out how to say it, Twickenham, which is across the Thames from Richmond, which is where Ted Lasso has his imaginary soccer, and it's in Great Oakland. And while I was there was an exhibition of the work of two artists, Van Gogh. This is great, good stuff. Early Van Gogh, beautiful, beautiful. And this guy. And I had never put the two of them together. I had never thought about them in the same breath at all. And apparently, Ansel Keefer, when he was young, spent a lot of time looking at Van Gogh and thinking about Van Gogh. And at a distance, when I first saw this, I said, oh, that's a Van Gogh. Not the best Van Gogh, but it's a Van Gogh. And I walked up to it, and it's an Ansel Keefer. And this is a Keefer. And this is a Keefer. And, I said, oh, right, wheat fields and fields and all this kind of stuff. And I never made the connection. And look, the truth is, nobody is going to confuse this with that. This is a Keefer. But I think, my sense is that what had a profound effect on Keefer, that Van Gogh and doing these things and thinking about Van Gogh and drawing like that, had a profound effect on Keefer. And somehow, it became part of it, to this day. Now, up to this point, I haven't talked about content at all. I'm going to go we're almost at the end of this, so, the content or the subject of the piece. And, I can remember, I don't know if everybody in the room who makes art is like this, there's a whole bunch of things that are related to art that I don't remember at all, my art and experiences I've had. Then there are special experiences that I remember so vividly, it was like it happened yesterday. The first time I saw this in the Museum of Modern Art, I was absolutely blown away. And the reason I was blown away, this is City Square by Giacometti, was that it's so connected with my experience living in New York City and things that I had seen on the street. And, you know, it was connected to also, you know, I felt, again, a kind of kindred spirit, and I said, oh, this is the coolest thing ever. And so for probably the last 45 years, I've been doing paintings that are associated with city squares and people walking in the streets. And one of the things about this is this idea of, you know, they're anonymous. You know, well, I'll show you, look, this is my homage to, my dysfunctional homage to, this was a piece that I showed at Ashland Hall, you know, to Giacometti, but it also has to do with people like Jane Jacobs, who was the, you know, the activist, the community activist, who talked about the movement in streets as being a kind of choreography. And Giacometti himself talks about the choreography in the streets as being a choreography that never repeats itself. And that he said, you know, I'm paraphrasing that, screw art. Just look at the streets, look at the people in the streets, look at how they go. And that was something that was an incredible inspiration for her. And, you know what she called it, as I said, Jane Jacobs called it the ballet of a good city and movement of people. The fact that it's kind of coincidental that people not be in the same space, they didn't have any credit, that they're just there, and that the people themselves redefine the space. And when I first saw Martha Graham, I went, well, not exactly, but I mean, I was thinking, well. And what really grabbed me about Martha Graham wasn't the individual gestures of individual dancers, but was how everybody moved from the stuff. And I thought, wow, this is the same deal. And when I saw Balanchine, I thought the same thing. This is really cool. So there were all these things that were reinforcing my ideas, you know, or my love of this kind of thing. And then I met Walt Whitman. And my favorite poem of all time is Crossing Brooklyn Ferry. And if any of you haven't read it, I suggest you read it because it's one of the most beautiful pieces of poetry I've ever read. And Whitman is in love with people. And he's in love with the idea of the city. And he's in love with these experiences that we all have. And, you know, and what's so cool about that, just take a second, so cool about that poem is that Whitman addresses us directly in the poem. He at one point said, if you of a generation of so many Hanses, generations, he says, just like you felt when we looked at the river Solow. Just as, you know, there's a whole series of things. And so there's a kind of universality. So a couple of weeks before our exhibition, not my exhibition, I started this, and these are, the whole piece is, I think about 7 feet by 11 feet. And well, getting back to this, somebody asked me when they saw this whether I use an eraser. And if you look at all that black stuff down at the bottom, that's an eraser in a different form. The eraser is made of metamorphosis. And you know, because it's size and thing. And one of the things that's bad about being short is you gotta get a ladder and you gotta do it. And also, if you can't bend over or having a little stool like that, that's our dog training stool, but we've never used it in the dog run. So I work on stuff at the bottom. And this thing, which is still unfinished, went through a whole variety of changes. And if you look at the person sort of over on the left-hand side, he has like 7 heads. Because I couldn't figure out where it should be. I mean, I really was playing around with it. I couldn't figure out the perspective. I couldn't figure out, you know, a bunch of stuff. And if you look at on the right-hand side, you have 2 figures there. And this figure, I fell in love with. Now, this is all invented. I wasn't drawing from something else. I mean, this is stuff out of my sort of past experience and imagination. You see all those little studies over there that I pinned up because I, for some, made me feel like I was doing something like artists do. But if you look at the figure, I fell in love with her. And I realized at one point there were two things wrong with her. One, that she was in the wrong spot. And the second was that she was facing the audience. And one of the things about Giacometti that I so love is that the people that he sculpts and many times that he draws are anonymous. Not all the time, but they're anonymous. And so one of the things that takes a little courage to do, but you have to do it, is sometimes you have to have a divorce. And I had a divorce. And so we lost her. So there she goes. She's gone. But once again, getting back to that idea that I talked about the importance of the entire thing is, as much as you may love part of what you're doing, what really counts is everything and how it all works together. And the way I left it, it's still unfinished. So this joins the other things that are unfinished, rolled up in my studio. But this is the way that I left it. And, you know, part of what's so much fun, and it is fun doing this kind of stuff, is there's no, the process is just moving things around and trying to figure things out and trying to develop a way of working where you're not precious about it. And, you know, ultimately, I mean, look, I'll show you. This is the blank piece of paper. Now, the goal of any time that I paint or make a piece of art is to make this into something special and magical. That's the bottom line. You want to make something that's good to look at. So this is still a work in progress. I was having fun with it. And again, the only thing bad about this, I told you before about the walls, the portable walls. The homoso here I screwed in front of my bookshelf. So the problem with screwing things in front of a bookshelf is that when you say, oh, I want to look at that book, you can't do it. So I think in January I'm going to make it a movable thing so I can pick it up. All right, so the last thing I want to show you is this is another composite, and this is sort of like a family history. And to be honest, when I started working on this, I didn't know what it was going to be. I didn't have an idea what it was. And you see over on the left hand, I'm going to give you talk about the content of it, but then I'm going to say, you know, something that I think is vaguely valuable, which is lower right-hand side, that's my daughter, Catherine, who's now in her 30s, when she was a little kid, and we were living in Florence, and that's at least my life, and our trained pigeons. And then over on the other side, there are multiple Catherines sitting in the Spanish chapel of San Diego Villa. If you've ever seen that, the fresco there is one of the most incredible things I've ever seen. And she is looking angelic on her cell phone, thinking about where we're going to eat lunch and finding it. And up in the middle, sort of the right side, but up in the middle is my son Stephen, who we took as when he was a little kid on high school trips, and he had been in Italy a number of times. And there are multiple Stephens, you can't see there, but one of them is him kicking a soccer ball in the Congo. Not Florence, but elsewhere. And then, you know, my painting or drawing of members of the family, Catherine, Lisa, and my little self-portrait looking thinner than I ever have looked. And having said this, I'm going to tell you, my family and these memories mean a tremendous amount. They mean a tremendous amount. And all of that means nothing if the person who walks into a room and looks at them doesn't say, wow, I love that room. Those things over there, the sky painted inside of the building, the way it's designed, the lines of the perspective, which are all so lines that break things up. So if I love my family, you know, my idea is that I love my family, or I want to do justice to them, I have to understand, I have to divorce myself
metaphorically from them, and I have to focus on how am I going to put this together in a way that when people see it, it's going to have an impact. And, and that is why, in a way, I love talking about content to the end. Because my approach to making art, even though, in the back of my mind, I always have ideas about what the content is and how you draw something, what it means. It's about these formal elements and how do you put the formal elements together. That's about it. I just wanted to say a couple other things. One is that when I was talking about kindred spirits before, I've been very fortunate in that my experience in Staten Island, I've met some remarkable people. And one of the people I mentioned before that I worked with, and I wasn't kidding, Scott Sandell would present workshops, and I would be there watching him present the workshops. And if somebody said, "Oh, I need to sharpen my pencil," sharpen the pencil. Scott has become a very, very close friend, and kindred spirit, intellectual companion. We talk about art all the time, and he's had a profound effect on my art, in spite of the fact that the work that he does is abstract, but it's beautiful and it's wonderful, and looking at the work really makes me smile. I'm very, very happy, and also many of the ideas that he came up with. And the other thing that I want to do is I want to thank the church. And this is a beautiful building. The time I was working downstairs, I thought I owned the building because nobody else was there. I heard strange people making noises from upstairs. They were music and dancing around. But beautiful space and gorgeous. And what really makes this space has nothing to do with the facility. It has to do with people. And my opportunity to work with Sue and Sam and the rest of the staff, Carrie, has been wonderful. And they are so generous and terrific. And, with Sam and Sue, they laugh at jokes that I make that aren't funny, so that's worth something in itself. And they are what makes this place. And then there's the other level of, I can't remember their names, the two people who founded this place. I have never met people who were so generous in spirit and have been not only supportive of the community and the kids in the community, but personally supportive. They are remarkable. And, what I used to say, one of the things about teaching at Pearson Public School, East End of Long Island, in a community that when we moved here felt like a second-class community. Working class community with this strange collection of artists and writers floating around. But they couldn't compete with East Hampton, they couldn't compete with Southampton. This is before the Diana Ross School, but those schools had it. And nobody had any expectation that the kids in our school could amount to anything. I mean, this is a long time ago, but that was the truth. And nobody had the belief that any of them would amount to anything in the arts. And the fortunate thing about it is that the truth about education, administrators know nothing about it, which is a good thing. And they never come up to the second floor of any building. And the consequence of that was that we were given a tremendous amount of latitude and flexibility to do stuff that was outside of the box. And you add to that, a gentleman named Kobe Betts, who decides that art and architecture education are important, raised the Rue de Chandeliers, specifically for Satin Harbor kids, and says, we want you to spend $100,000, $120,000 a year doing stuff in the arts and architecture. That will help. And the consequence of all that is that we have kids from our little school that are painters, filmmakers, architects that are all over the world doing this stuff. and making the world a better place and a more beautiful place. And, what I said to them, but, and I think it's true of the people who work here, we don't have to go around the world to see where the magic exists, because the magic is, it's here. And it's with our kids, it's with the folks that work and had the vision for this place here. And I know I use the word magic a lot, but it is extraordinary. So that's it. Thanks.
If you'd like to take a few questions before we head out.
I'll make up answers.
Okay. Are there any questions from the audience?
Now, this may have been a bit much. If I went a little long, I apologize. When Sherry did this thing last week, where she invited a bunch of artists that had work in the exhibition to come and talk for 1 minute about their work, I labored over what I was going to say in 1 minute. We got here and she said, we're increasing it to 2 minutes. I thought, okay, great. And I still went over. So, and I was the only one who actually made notes. Everybody else was talking extemporaneously. And I thought to myself, geez, that was really depressing. I had to make notes. And then I couldn't find where the notes were. Go ahead.
I think we do have a question back here. We have a couple back here, and then I'll be up to you, Abram.
Thank you so much for your talk and your sharing your art and your concepts. I'm curious about this question of how, when an artist paints something, they are transforming how they see, not just the subject, they're figuring out how to see the subject, and also kind of transforming or informing how they see the world. And I'm curious how that relates to your studies of Florence, because Florence is, it's a very richly layered city in terms of time and form. I see your collage work, if I can refer to it that way. That's very kind of layered. Your interest in how strangers being in a public space, how that shapes the space, and also the mind beyond. And the inquiry into the square, kind of like a reference to the map. So I'm just wondering if you can talk a little bit about how representing Florence maybe transformed how you saw or experienced.
Well, really good question. First, the transformation that happens to metamorphosis that happens in an artist happens over a period of time. It doesn't happen necessarily with one drawing or one painting or something like that. I'm going to be honest with you. When the first time I went to Florence with Elise, one of the things that knocked me out were the Christmas decorations, which looked like they were made out of saran wrap across the streets, and they were beautiful. And then seeing the art, because I hadn't seen a lot of Italian Renaissance art. And what you say about it being layered, I mean, I get excited by ideas that many people have. I mean, some ideas that nobody else is excited about. But this idea of layered past history, present history, and, that's Florence. But that's also, in a way, what making art is like. It's the past and it's the present. And so I fell in love with Florence. And so much of my family's history, in one way or another, is somehow associated with it. And then it was wonderful traveling with, and again, I've taken a lot of kids to Florence before, but have the kids make art in Florence. And to have Scott and I be there, and we had a lot of talks about what we experienced during that trip, what was it, and how different people can notice and experience things completely different. And the truth is that we saw different things. And when we shared those ideas, Scott told me some of his ideas, I went, wow. And I've been to Florence a lot, I never, I never thought about it. So, yeah, what could be better? Making art that's about the past and the present, and then going to a place. It's all about the past and in the present. There's a great book that Ellen Eric came out with, a book that's called, I can't say the Italian one, but Permanence and Metamorphosis. And that's a story of
Peter, when did you know this is your love for art, and when did you start to draw?
I've been drawing since I was a little kid. I would draw army soldiers and horses. And there was a guy named John Nady who was big about how to draw horses, so I just practiced drawing horses. But the turning point was one summer, I think I was a sophomore in high school, when I broke my leg. Back in that day when you broke your leg, I broke my leg mowing the lawn. So the first thing I did when I got to the house here was get rid of all the lawn, because I didn't want to break my leg again. It wasn't like it is now. I was in a cast for 6 months. And, and it was up to my waist, and the only thing I could do was, my father had me build a rock wall, a retaining wall that I would crawl around rocks and to draw and paint. And because I was spending so much time sitting on the floor, drawing and painting, and then I came back to school and my art teacher said, wow, that's good. And I always thought I had a predilection. And I was incompetent at so many other things. Math, science. I don't want to go down the list. There's too many. Took French for 4 years and failed it 4 times. So this seemed to be the direction that I wanted to go. But when I left, I grew up outside of Syracuse, but when I left, what I knew about art was like this. My experience with art was like this. First went to Boston for a year, and ended up in New York City. And it opened up the world. I mean, it just changed everything.
So I'm really glad that you talked about time and memory, because that's what I wanted to ask you about, although you kind of covered it. But I always feel when I'm looking at your work that you're attempting to look through time, and that results somehow in memory. It never feels forced, like you're trying to make a statement about it, like a mad line about it or something. But there's this feeling always of you trying to get to a point where it's kind of like the way that dust motes in a lazy summer afternoon can make you feel suddenly eternal. So it's filled with that, but it also has a real trajectory. And of course, it's also like the pentimento of time of all great old Italian cities. So bravo, I think you're really there with the work.
Well, a lot of times, I'm not being cute about this, but I used to think of, I would use the metaphor of a sailboat tacked against the wind. It may not be the most direct route, but it gets you where you want to go, your destination. And then I realized that related to my experience, it was really difficult for someone, because there's a lot of times I don't go.
But I think you include, I think that you give yourself problems that necessitate a certain amount of buildup of consideration, of partly showing what you're doing, but then ultimately resulting in kind of a certainty, even though things are very layered, they're not summary, and they're very connected and active, and I love that evocation that you do.
Yeah, I think that the idea of movement, the idea of change, the idea of time connected to that. Because, again, most paintings, most visual art is like one thing. It doesn't exist like film, like a performance over it. But there have been aspects of what I do where I try to get a sort of feel that it's not at one point. I mean, in this picture, this is not the structure of most of my art, in the sense that most of my art is linear, or it's like one scene. And this is more like the Spanish chapel itself, where there are all these images that are popping around all over the place, and it's back.
Well, and rarely do you have anyone looking directly at the viewer. It's quite rare in your work. But I also just wanted to say, Peter, I remember like when I first kind of got schooled on what you did at the school, and I found out that you were taking kids to Florence. I thought, finally, a public school that does this. I think it's so important. I think it's such an achievement. We suffer from xenophobia in this country so profoundly, and you blew the world wide open for kids to really experience. And I just want to say thank you. I don't think teachers get a fraction of the credit they deserve.
So we had, and just to say this, I said some things about administrators, some of my best friends are administrators. But I have to say that our administration of our school was very supportive of that. You know, Florence, Spain, we went to Cuba between Obama and the Pope. We didn't have the same experience as they had. But I agree with you that it's transformative.
Would that all schools had generous Rothersham trust availability so that they could?
This is like divine intervention.
Thank you. It's really
I'm not going to
interesting.
take any questions.
Yeah, because we were talking about puzzles the other day, and I told him I was going to ask a question about puzzles, but I'm not going to do that.
Okay.
Instead, I was really interested in what you were saying about this divorcing kind of process. And I'm noticing you have a lot of street photography, and that there's this kind of, I'm thinking of you walking and wandering around streets, taking photos, and I'm thinking, how does that divorce happen in that setting of like, how is that different than you going to get a coffee, for instance, without a camera versus you having a camera? I'm just wondering if you can speak about that, that way of walking, and to what degree are you limiting yourself? Do you have like a subject matter in mind that gives you parameters, or are you just kind of open to anything that shows up that's interesting?
Well, you know, I take, well, first of all, I draw everywhere I go. And if I forget my sketchbook sometimes, it'll be a little scrap of paper that I'm doing little drawings on. With the photography I take, they're not all this. A lot of things are snapshots, or, you got the sunset working, you got this thing over here, you got people with food falling out of their mouths, humorously, groups of whatever it's going to be. So I shoot a lot of different things, but there have been times where, understanding what I was interested in, I would go, like there was a trip I took to Florence, where all I was going to do was research. The research was drawing and was photographing stuff, and of course that was the trip where my camera stopped working. And half of what I took was out of focus because I can't. And the light meter, it was bad. And ironically, some of the out of focus pictures ended up making themselves into some of my art, because when I looked at it, I said, oh my God. Look, and I fall in love sometimes with the people I take pictures of. If you guys are familiar with that wonderful Hopper painting of the usherette that's against the wall like this, I mean, I love that painting. And I'm at the Rijksmuseum, not with kids, with a bunch of adults. They're like kids, but older. And, everybody now is taking pictures with their camera of all the paintings, and I'm thinking, yeah, that's, And so I'm taking pictures of crowds, crowds of people, and, a despondent mother with her two kids, facing away from the river, and just a sadness on her face. And in the corner, I see a guard, a female guard, and she's like in meditation. She looks so despondent. And I go up and I take a bunch of pictures of her right before the other guards surround me and try to confiscate my camera and arrest me because they were concerned about me taking pictures of the guard. So they forced me to delete all the pictures. And I didn't know how to delete them off my camera because I usually use mine, and so that became a comic thing too. It at least got some good pictures of them surrounding me, doing this whole thing. And the only picture of the guard that came out was one where she was totally out of it. It was like she was moving. And I was able somehow to use that, you know, but again, it isn't simply that I'm taking pictures of, you know, stuff that I'm going to use in my painting. You know, and again, I have a tremendous amount of respect for photography, and as a discipline. And it's one reason that I've really never shown my, because I'm using it as a reference. I'm not using it for whatever. And, you know, there's nothing better than photography, but we are living in a world where we are surrounded by visual noise. And it's on Instagram, and it's on Facebook, and everybody has a camera, or a film and a camera. And it's like you're overwhelmed with it. And to try to find magic in there, to find the thing that's special, the picture that's special, you know, it's a big thing. I don't know if that answers your question. I thought you were going to ask me about if I was going to teach a class, how would I do like to put it?
I think we have time for one more question. Myrna, I am coming to you.
Thank you, Peter. That was a wonderful talk, so insightful. I just wondered, so practical, and where you went to school and who your influences, the teachers were.
Well, I was born under the White Stone Bridge. Well, I was born in a hospital in New York City, but then we moved under the White Stone Bridge, a little like Woody Allen and whatever. And then my parents, who couldn't stand their parents, said, we got to get away from them. So they brought me up to central New York, a place called Manlius, which is about 10 minutes outside of Syracuse. And I was very fortunate in that the art teacher we had was just, you know, this is a story. I mean, you know, it was a remarkable teacher. Yeah, in high school. And his name was Frank Ferraro. And he actually, yes, and he was at my school. And then I won, similar to your wonderful husband, I won a Scholastic Art Scholarship at Boston University, you know, through Scholastic Magazine. And then from there, after I broke up with a girl that I was going with, I had to leave town, I decided to go to Cooper Union. Fortunately, the people who were looking at my portfolio when I transferred, it was the early 70s, we were all on drugs, and they really couldn't see what they were looking at, and I got in. And you know, it was, and because of that, because I came in as a transfer student, I didn't have to take the foundation courses, so I could focus on painting. I could focus on taking Dory Ash's class for 4 years in a row. I do have a record. I had Todd Carpenter, who was an extraordinary photographer, teach photography, tell me my photographs weren't photography. And so he kicked me out of his class, and then Ruby Kadish, who was a very close friend of Jackson Pollock, and actually became a very close friend of mine, looked at my sculpture, which was these little wax figurines, surrounded by these huge paintings I was doing, very emotional paintings. He looked at them and he went, I had them all in a shoebox, and he said, all right, I'll pass you, but you got to promise never to sculpt again. So I mean, any person who's ever gone to Cooper Union that has been banned from certain subject areas. That's the story. I mean, look at, I've been so fortunate. I didn't expect to move to Staten Island. I didn't expect to be teaching in public school. I didn't expect to end up going to Cooper Union. I mean, all these things sort of happened. And again, and can I just say this, you know, a shout out to making art. There's nothing better. You know, for the last 2 years, Scott and I have been working on this exhibition that we were, you know, that we were doing together, and it was so intense, and it was like so crazy sometimes, and I mean, sometimes I wouldn't get out of my studio except to walk around the house. And one time I walked around the house and saw that the foundation of our front deck was rotted away after living in the house for 30 years and not noticing it. And so we had to have it repaired. But it was so intense, but you know something? And it doesn't always work. You know, it's not, everything doesn't come out okay. But it's so wonderful. And in these crappy times that we live in, you know, with all the garbage that's going on in the world, there's nothing better than doing this. Nothing better. So again, I feel very, very good. And to have a wife who is modestly patient and has put up with, you know, it's not the easiest thing. Yeah, I know. So,